Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey everybody, it's Jessa. Welcome back to the Better Sex Podcast. So glad you're here, excited for another episode. I have so much fun doing this. And today's a day where I go back and hit a topic that I've talked about with somebody before, but I've got a new guest, different person, with a slightly different perspective, of course, on a topic. And I just find that so interesting because there's just endless conversations I can have about all these things related to sex and relationships. So today we're diving in to erotic touch, sensual erotic touch, mindful, present, attuned touch. How that is our first language, really, how primal and important it is, some of the aspects of it, what it unlocks and unleashes, and some information about how to practice, how to start, because maybe this is a new concept, maybe this is not something you've ever really thought about or known about or been aware of, but it's attainable, it's accessible for people. It's not like you've got to go to, like the guest, you don't have to go to some tantric retreat in Thailand to do this. You can stay at home, watch some videos, learn some more, and just practice lighthearted without any pressure or goal with your partner and add an experience of touch that would really add a lot to your sex life. So I hope you get a lot out of it. Christina Antonyan is my guest. She's talking to me from Bali, which now I got to say I want to go there because I could see her in this interview. It looked amazing. But she's so passionate and knowledgeable about this, and I think you're going to enjoy it. And before we start the show today, it is sponsored by Intimacy with Ease. It's a method to help otherwise happy couples achieve a sex life that is easy and fun for both of them, so you can actually just enjoy your sex life with zero stress. For more information, if you want to watch a brief little training video that's available, all of that, go to intimacywithease.com. So, Christina, thank you so much for being with me today.
A pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. I'm so happy that we're doing this.
Yeah, and listeners will not know that I'm sitting and looking at you in Bali, that you're taking your time out of a wonderful visit there to talk to us. So I really appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So do you mind starting with just what brought your interest in erotic touch? Like, why this topic? Why is this part of your life's work?
Yes, erotic touch is actually very near and dear to my heart because in 2014, I went for a 1-week seminar that was teaching about Taoism and Tantra. And part of the course was we were learning about erotic touch. And one day, the women were giving erotic touch to the man without receiving. And the following day, we switched. So the man were giving erotic touch to the women without us having to do or having to give back. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was such a special experience because in my own personal experience, every time we've made love, it's this beautiful dance of giving and receiving pleasure. So I had never been in a situation where I just received and there was no obligation to give anything back. And it was such a beautiful moment. And it was for both of us, really, because it just took so much pressure off. And it was just so wonderful. Just like when we go and get a massage, right? We just receive. But this was something a lot deeper than that. And it was just this beautiful erotic energy that was circulating all through my body. And it was focused on the genitals, which I had never experienced before. So I also realized that I was incredibly uncomfortable when it came giving pleasure with my hands, especially to a man. And what I mean by that is I realized that I was incredibly comfortable during sex and I was incredibly comfortable giving oral pleasure. But when it came to giving pleasure with my hands, I was incredibly uncomfortable. And sometimes I would grip too hard and a man would say, ouch. And I didn't know what I was doing wrong. And I realized that in that moment when we were learning this, I realized that a circumcised penis is very different, receives touch very differently than an uncircumcised penis because the skin is very much intact. And when I went and did further research, there's about like 20,000 nerve endings on the skin. So that's what I was doing wrong. And it was gripping too hard and I was hurting some of the men that I was touching. So it was so nice to just learn that beautiful sensual touch to give. And when a man says harder, then I can go a bit harder. But if he doesn't, then the whole sensuality aspect of it was just so beautiful. And there is such a beautiful opening that happens that usually it doesn't, or it didn't for me during sexual experiences, because this was just all about receiving and it was all about relaxing into pleasure. That was one of my aha moments, because as we go through the process of arousal, we get to a certain level where it's time to orgasm. This was something completely different. I had never relaxed into pleasure. So I was able to feel every subtle touch, and all of a sudden my senses just became alive. I could smell the candles in the room. If there was flowers in the room, I can smell that. It was just so beautiful.
And it sounds like you're making a real distinction between when I think of erotic touch, I guess I'm grouping all the different kinds of sensations we might have, but you're saying there's something very different about using hands, specifically fingers, right?
Yes.
Like that kind of touch is unique.
It's very unique because I also realized that our fingertips are actually one of the most sensitive areas on our body because there's so much energy that's stored in our fingertips. So it's no surprise that touch is one of those incredible languages. I mean, it's part of I forget the name of the author who came up with the 5 languages, but touch is one of the languages.
Right.
Love languages.
Yeah.
And Carl Jung also had this favorite quote, and I'm paraphrasing it, where he said, often the hands will solve a mystery that the intellect has struggled with.
Huh.
And I'm still paraphrasing it a bit, but he does say it a bit differently.
Yeah.
And I think John Paul II had a beautiful quote where he said, the hands are the heart's landscape. And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, yes. I also realized that once I learned how to do that, and once this whole new world opened up in terms of touch, sensual touch. Erotic touch is really just a form of very sensual, beautiful, present touch, which I was very disconnected when I was touching. I wasn't feeling all the different responses that I was giving to my partner. And I realized that when we feel disconnected from our partners, when we are, let's say, having a disagreement or we're not both on the same page, it's such an amazing way to actually reconnect us. And the days where I just don't feel like having sex, this is such an amazing way to keep this beautiful connection.
So what do you think makes touch so important to us as people, as humans, right? Like why is this so crucial in our relationships?
I think because it's really the first form of language that we experience when we were born. Those of us who I think have been lucky to have parents who introduced us to the language of nourishing touch by holding us, caressing us gently, softly at birth as we experience that feeling of love and being nurtured and cared for. I think that's really like one of the most beautiful silent languages that we have received when we were first born.
Yeah. So it's almost like, well, we've been imprinted to it to some degree, right? Like that's our first, I get that, our first way of being communicated with as a baby.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And I realize that whenever I have certain like blockages or I feel uneasy in my body, as soon as I go and get a massage, it just opens up all the energy blocks that are in my body. If the masseuse is good and they're giving present touch. So it's just this incredible form of language and exchange that is just so important to many of us. And when we're missing it, we feel incredibly disconnected from it. At least I do.
Yeah. So what are the kinds of mistakes people make with touch? I mean, you're sort of alluding to some of them in your own experience when you went to this workshop and realizing, but like, what are we all doing wrong?
I don't think it's all of us, but a lot of the common ones that I have experienced myself and as a giver as well, while I was giving this type of touch, was awareness, touching, being very mechanical in my touch, not being present, being too rough, not being able to read the partner's body language, what feels right and what doesn't for them. Bad touch is very much like getting a bad massage, when they're just mindlessly touching and rubbing you, and you sometimes walk out of there being more in pain than you initially went in. And that's really like some of the common mistakes that people make when it comes to touch.
That sounds like there's a theme or a thread there of not paying attention, like not being with the other. Not present, not tuned in, like if you're in your own mind or you're just in your own experience with that you're not plugging into the connection that there might be.
Exactly. And actually, you just said it. When you're in your own mind, the person who's receiving your touch can actually feel that. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like when we're making love, right? When you're in your head and you are thinking about stuff. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but one of my ex-boyfriends.
No, never.
One of my ex-boyfriends actually said to me one day. He said, "Where did you go while we were making love?" And I said, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I was just so embarrassed," because he immediately felt it.
Yeah.
And it's this exchange, this energetic connection that we feel when we're giving touch or when we're making love. If we're not present, the other person definitely feels it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said erotic touch. I think what you said is erotic touch is just one form of a sensual touch. Is that, how do you define what makes touch erotic versus whatever else it might be?
Because there's many different kinds of touch, and they all, for me, fall under the category of erotic touch. So there's like caressing, there's stroking, there's tickling, there's squeezing, there's tapping, there's soft touch, there's firm touch. That's what I mean by the slow and sensual is just one form of it, because there's so many different varieties of touch.
And is erotic touch defined by where? I mean, is it genital specific? Is it defined by sort of where you're being touched, or is it just sort of the intent and the awareness that you bring to it?
It's the intent and awareness that you bring into it, because I realized also that one of my favorite things to actually talk about is, what do we mean when we say we are all wired differently? What exactly are we talking about when we say that? Do you know?
I don't. I mean, I don't know where you're going to go with that. So please share.
In my experience, it's been that our muscular structure, our bone structure, for the most part, it's in the same place. But our nerve endings is very individual. It's incredibly different from one person to the next. So let's say if I like having my neck nibbled, it may feel good to me, but it may feel awful to you. And I'm sorry, I'm just using you as an example.
That's fine. I volunteer. That's fine.
So it really just depends on the sensitivity of the person's body. And for some people, the reason why I really focus on genitals is because I realize that most of us have never experienced this type of touch on our genitals. A lot of times when we go to get a massage, and a lot of people have had massages, those parts are often skipped.
Right.
So a lot of us have really never been touched on our genital area. And I realized for the majority of us women, we hold actually a lot of sexual energy in our thighs and buttocks area. So it's so amazing when you can actually have that area massaged and have that energy flowing instead of that energy being stuck in that place.
Yeah.
And for a man, in my experience, for women as well, but definitely for men, I think it's such an incredible way for them to experience non-visual pleasure. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times when I'm giving someone, let's say, what's called a lingam massage, and lingam is the Sanskrit word for penis, which means a wand of light. I know that men, we've heard this before many times, that men are visual creatures. So when I'm giving them this type of touch, I actually put a towel or a blindfold on their eyes, because I don't want to be the source of their pleasure. I want them to go in their body and experience sensations and be inside their body like they've never been before. And the same is true for women, because when we are in our body and when we're experiencing sensations, going back to the point I was making earlier, the first time I was touched this way, it's such an incredible feeling that most of us have just never experienced before.
So I'm imagining, people listening to this who, I don't know if they'll have had any exposure to this idea, if it's brand new, but they may be thinking, this is intriguing, right? Like I'd like to capture some of this in my relationship. I mean, they could sign up for some sort of Taoist or Tantric retreat, but what are ways that people could get in touch with this, that they could maybe practice this with a partner, and they could discover their own ability to receive this and their ability to give this?
Yes. So that's actually one of the reasons why I decided to make a video series, and it's a 3-part video series. One is to learn how to touch the breasts, because wow, there is so much beauty, energy in our breasts that never get that kind of attention because we never touch them that way. We don't even take the time to touch ourselves that way. So it's a yoni massage, it's a lingam massage, and a breast massage. And this is the reason why we made this video series and course, to actually teach people all the different hand movements that are possible when you give this type of touch, and to show them how slow and how sensual it can all be done. And sometimes you can definitely go fast, because I definitely believe in variety. Variety is the spice of life, and you can't just do it in one way. But this is the beauty of this type of touch. It's mixing it up, and it's experiencing all the different types of sensations, from high arousal to low arousal to relaxing into pleasure, all of it, the whole thing. And the one thing I would say, actually caution the listeners, is please do not Google to find a masseuse under the name of Tantra massage or an erotic massage or any of those things, because unfortunately there are now so many people who are using the name Tantric massage to give what is a very regular style of massage or sexual services.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Jessa here, taking just a quick break. Thanks for listening so far. I wanted to let you know about the sex quiz that I've put together called How Healthy is Your Sex Life? I've taken a close look at the typical ways that I see couples get into trouble with sex, including avoidance, neglect, negativity, distraction, and boredom. And the free quiz will score your individual results based on these factors. And then I provide my recommendations and ideas, including my top 10 sex tips, which will help you make instant improvement. If you'd like to take the quiz and see how healthy your sex life is, you can do it right now at sexhealthquiz.com.
Okay, so if somebody is going to use your course or some other material, and they're going to start to explore this with a partner, and we're talking about two people who are kind of novices for this, do you have, are there pitfalls? Is there advice you would give them? What's the best way they can approach this in terms of trying to put some of this into practice?
Actually, the best is the reason why we made the course is actually for people who have never experienced this type of touch. We literally show all the different hand movements that are possible. So it's just a matter of watching it on your computer and just repeating what you see on the computer. And eventually you turn off the computer, then you go into your own intuition and you go to your own dance and you start doing it by yourself. But for someone like me, who was a beginner and had no idea what they were doing, in the course that I was taking in Thailand, yes, they did demonstrate some of the hand gestures. So just by looking, I was able to actually repeat the same thing.
Yeah.
And the more I did it, the more comfortable I got with it. But the beauty is, the more creative I also got with it. Then I started adding my own different forms of gesture, just simply by just being in tuned into the experience and just seeing what the woman's or the man's body was, how they were reacting to the certain type of touch that I was giving.
Yeah, I can imagine that those, we start out with sort of rules or techniques or something to give you the foundation from which then you can get creative or, like you said, tune into your intuition and pay attention to your partner.
I found that a lot of rules when it comes to this type of touch simply don't apply, other than the best rule is actually be present. Don't feel nervous. Watch your partner's body.
Yeah.
And I understand the nervous part. I was very much nervous, but a lot of it is also really communication in a form of, if something doesn't feel good, then you just say it doesn't feel good.
Yeah. So that was I guess the other thing I was wondering is, how much feedback are you getting from a partner? Should you be giving a partner? You should be asking, does this feel good? Like, how important is any sort of verbal communication, or should people be trying to minimize that as they're learning,
Yes, as they're learning, in my personal experience, it really just depends. Some people need a lot of instructions, and some people love that back and forth dialogue. Some people just say, "Please, no more talking. Let's just try. Let's just try." It really just depends on the people. So, it's really individual when it comes to the context of communication.
Okay. Now, I am thinking, in my sex therapist hat here, that certainly it would be important to speak up if something was not feeling good to somebody, right? Like if it hurts or it's wrong,
yes.
Don't just let things happen to you that you don't want to be happening.
No. I actually, one time I did have a gentleman who, when we were practicing, he had put his finger inside my vagina, but his knuckle was actually rubbing in my outer labia. And I can feel the burning sensation when it rubs too much. And I can feel that we have to position that in a different way because it's rubbing on my outer labia.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get a burn mark that I have to deal with later. So yes, communication is definitely important, but over communication can just feel too mechanical at times.
Right. Yeah. So I guess you're really trying to get into flow or a dance of noticing what's happening, trying things, giving a little bit of extra, I want to say leeway, but that's not quite the right word. Some freedom to explore and learn, and yet
some freedom to explore. Yes.
Making sure you're keeping yourself safe too.
Mm-hmm. And oil is definitely a big part of this. So coconut oil is one of my favorite oils to use, but there's also avocado oil that I use. There's almond oil that I use, and really whatever. I also add many different scents to the oils because I'm a very sensitive person. So rose oil, frangipani oil, patchouli oil. You could really get creative. And the most important thing is really to set the space. Space is incredibly important. So I love creating this beautiful space where there's candles, where there is maybe some incense, maybe some oils burning, and the temperature. For the receiver, it has to feel good.
Yeah.
I have done a massage once, again, in Thailand, where I was freezing. And I just could not relax. My entire body was just tense the entire time. And I kept saying, I'm so cold, but there was no way to warm up the place because it's Thailand. It's always warm, except inside on that day. There was no air conditioning on. There was nothing on. It was just cold. So we tried to heat up the oil to put hot oil on my body. And I was still very cold. Yeah. I went and took a hot shower and it was still, I would just cool down very quickly.
Yeah.
So creating space is also really important.
Okay. I can feel another question in my head, but I'm not sure I can quite come up with the words. But what do you imagine would happen if people practice this to whatever degree? Maybe they're not going to become experts or something or devote their lives to it. But what difference do you think this might make in their sex life with a partner? If they just even dabbled in this, if they watched the videos or, explored this to some degree and you pursued it partly, what do you think might happen?
So what are the benefits of this kind of touch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, even not being an expert, but, at least having some exposure and awareness about this.
Yeah, definitely. I remember one of the testimonials that I got was from a 70-year-old couple who's been married for 50 years. And they had never touched each other like this. I was so happy when I received that email and I read it because it just warmed my heart. Some of the benefits is really learning how to relax into pleasure and feel all the different sensations that we generally, by habit, we don't get to feel because we never give ourselves the time to be able to do that. So just from doing this type of touch to many different people, I realized that a lot of people, not only do they relax into pleasure, but our body just starts to feel every subtle sensation that people haven't been able to feel before because we are so relaxed. And when we're in that state of relaxation, there's so much magic that happens because of our openness. We also gain a very deep understanding of not only our own body, but our lover's body and their desires and their preferences. We learn a lot of times. I actually encourage when I'm giving this type of touch, people forget to breathe. And a lot of time, so I encourage people to actually use that beautiful arousal and sexual energy to breathe deeply from the belly, to circulate that energy all throughout their body. And the beauty of this type of touch is there's no goal. Orgasm is not the goal. It's not to get your lover to orgasm. It's actually quite the opposite. It's to get them to feel that beautiful sexual erotic energy in their body. And a lot of times for men, it's actually an ejaculation process, not an ejaculation process. I've showed many men through this type of touch how to separate their orgasm from their ejaculation. And when they learn that, when they feel that, because it's one thing to say, but it's another thing to feel that. When they feel that, it's like this whole new world that opens up to them.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful experience. And a lot of times I realize that because the body becomes so unguarded during this type of touch, there's also a lot of release that happens. By release, I mean, sometimes I've had tears come out because of something that needed to come out. So yes, I was aroused, but there was definitely an emotional experience that I needed to express because I was feeling certain sensations in different parts of my body. And a lot of trauma gets held in that also in our genitals. So a lot of it is really just releasing is such an incredible thing that happens with this type of touch.
Yeah, I'm having this visual of like we're walking around with only 10% plugged in this practice of awakening everything would be sort of like, sticking all the jacks in getting all the wiring connected,
You get, but not only do you get all the wiring connected. So one of the important things is actually every single experience that I've had has never been the same. It's not a routine type of experience because it turns into such a flow and a dance that you just never know what's going to come up. Yeah. Every time when I get a yoni massage, I have no idea where I'm going to go. And that's also the beauty of it because I go on a journey and wherever that journey takes me is where I go. And the same thing happens for a man. We go on a journey together. And the giver is actually the holding space for anything that wants to come up. Yeah, I have had men who actually have also cried during their experience because some stuff came up for them. Yeah. And it's so nice to just be able to give them a hug and hold them in that moment so they feel safe, which is not something that we often talk about when we talk about pleasure and men in general, is their safety.
Well, thank you. Where can people learn more about you? Where do they find your courses?
On my website, confidentlovers.com. All my social media links are there. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I have quite a few videos on YouTube, not talking about erotic touch, but talking about other wonderful things. But erotic touch is definitely my passion because it has changed my life and so many of other people that I have been able to give as a gift as well.
Great. Well, I'll put the website in the show notes too, so people have easy access to that. So,
thank you.
Well, yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.